I don't know how long P&O has been in existence. I looked it up this morning. I Googled it. It looked like the first P&O cruiser came to Australia in 1930, the early 1930s. And it sent me a whole wonderful list of all of the names that the boats had, like Fair Sky and Fair Sea. And Oriana was, yeah. Aronsay, yeah. Wonderful. I bet there are fantastic memories with most people, Australians anyway, listening to this program, people who would be very sad to hear after all of these years P&O is upping anchor, so to speak. And I didn't know who to talk to, but I found a doctor of cruises, which I think is just the most wonderful thing to get a PhD in, isn't it? Doctor of cruises. Her name is Janelle Smith, and she's on the line. Hello.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. How are you?
What a wonderful specialty you've got.
Well, just to confirm, I'm not doctor quite yet. The thesis is under examination, so if the examiners are listening, please be kind. So I hope to get it in another month or two. Yeah, but it was my major for my PhD.
So are you on the boat at the moment? Are we talking to you on the boat?
Oh, no, I'm actually on the Gold Coast.
Oh,
and I'm looking at many boats, smaller boats, not cruises.
Yeah, well, of all the things that people study, and I sometimes think that not all of them are as useful as your particular specialty.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, look, give me a sort of a history of cruising in Australia. Was it P&O that started it in the beginning?
Yeah, it's one of the first cruise lines that started it in the beginning in Australia. As you just mentioned in your introduction, P&O has been around for some 92 years.
92 years.
So it's safe to say that P&O is the pioneer of cruising in Australia. And so the reason why there's a lot of sentiment around what they made, what the announcement they made this week was that they're either going to be fully taken over by Carnival, which is their parent company, and Carnival is the largest cruise line in the world. The reason why, most Aussies are being a bit sentimental about this is because P&O represents a name and a brand that's steeped in tradition and legacy and history and a lot of good memories, as you mentioned earlier, of travel and cruising, and great experiences and great friends.
And,
we love it.
And P&O stands for Pacific and
Oriental.
Peninsula.
Peninsula,
yes.
Peninsula and
Oriental, yes, cruise line.
Yeah. How many ships did they have in the beginning?
Oh, well, as to the history of P&O, it's typical in the cruise industry for smaller cruise lines to go through a period of, when they just launched back in the early 90s, when cruising wasn't really a big means or ways of traveling. Start with very smaller ships. A lot of ships, there were warships that actually were converted into cruise lines. That's the history of cruising worldwide.
Warships?
Yes, warships coming out of World War II. Yes, a lot of the ships were converted into cruise lines because after the war, it's like, okay, what do we do with these ships? And so a lot of, especially in the UK and in North America, a lot of the ships were converted from warships into former liners. And then when we realized that it was a big business, then we started developing proper and formal cruise ships.
Yeah, a lot of people who came to Australia, I'm talking about the great wave of immigration from Europe, would have come on P&O ships?
That's a possibility. That's a possibility as it relates to the history in Australia, because I'm not Australian. I'm not fully familiar with how persons actually came on a cruise line here. But I do know that P&O was one of the very first brands of cruises to actually run and operate in Australia.
And a huge brand at that. I was born in Sydney and spent the first sort of 30 years of my life there. And one of the landmark buildings in the city was the P&O building.
Yeah, nice. Very nice.
I don't know if it's still there. They're prone to knocking things down in Sydney. What is the accent, by the way?
The accent is now it's a bit chopped up, but I'm originally Jamaican.
Oh.
So I'm from Jamaica. I'm from the Caribbean.
No, it's not chopped up. I think it's a beautiful accent.
It's a bit chopped up now because I've lived in America, I've lived in the UK, I lived in New Zealand, now I'm here in Australia. So it's a bit watered down and diluted now. But I'm from Jamaica. I grew up in Jamaica, and the Caribbean represents the largest cruise market in the world. Yeah. We've had that legacy as well in history for the last 60 to 70 years. And so the reason why I did my PhD in cruises in particular is because tourism brings, especially cruise tourism, brings almost 50% of the foreign exchange to the island of Jamaica. And so it is something we depend on. It's something I know because that's what we do. That's what we call our bread and butter back on the island.
Yes, no, that makes sense. I mean, Les Ellicus, who's with me at the dining room table here from where we broadcast, he's just back from Cairns.
Cairns, Janelle. So whilst we're in Cairns, in the second week, 2 P&O liners docked into Chinaman's Creek, which is the
must be a pretty big creek.
Well, it is wide and must be fairly deep as well. And I noted the first boat had something like 3,600 passengers, and the second boat, a bit smaller at 2,600 passengers. But from what I understand, Janelle, something like crew to passenger ratio 1 to 6, is that right?
Yes, that's perfectly correct.
And so there's a lot of people who disembark to plough money into a local economy like Cairns. And of course, I didn't know what P&O was doing when I was up there last week, but now I do know, and I think that that's going to be a huge impact on the local economy if P&O isn't going to be going there at all. And I know certainly they're not going to be docking in Melbourne because the costs of going to the port costs is too much. So what's your general, and this has been not all that clear in the press, that how much of a reduction, I mean, okay, we're going from P&O to Carnival, but how much of a reduction will be the actual number of boats that will actually hit Australia's coastline, Janelle? What's your take on that?
Okay, so first, let's put it into a bit more context. So when it comes to Carnival has always had a role to play in P&O. They've, for the longest while, been the parent company for P&O. P&O has been a traditional Australian brand, and that's where the sentiment is coming from. So what they're planning to do, and it's a strategic move, it's a business move, because as much as we're, steeped in sentiment, it takes cash to care. And P&O is one of those few cruise ships that offer year-round sales in Australia, which is lovely. It's a great idea, but in practicality, it's expensive. Yeah. It's very expensive, especially when the demand does not remain consistent all the time. So in Australia, we have what is called wave season, which is between October to say about March, April, where most of the ships come from North America, sail down to our coast, and they operate within our shores. And so Royal Caribbean is here. We have Disney came last season for the first time, so did Virgin Voyages. All of those ships came. Now they go back up to North America, where North America is beginning their cruise season. So for Carnival to take basically, the ships are going to remain the same. Only one is going to be retired. However, the branding is what's going to change. So when you just mentioned the example to me with ships going to Cairns in particular, that won't change. So the ships will still go to Cairns. It's just they're going to look different because the branding P&O won't exist anymore. So the name P&O won't exist, but the ships that they have on fleet now will still exist. Only one will be retired because it's a little bit old. So in terms of the benefit to our communities like Cairns, cruising brings in a whopping over $5 billion to the Australian economy. And as you just mentioned, from being in Cairns, seeing how many people depend on cruise ships, it's the same thing in the Caribbean. And, especially in Australia, Australia has a lot of remote destinations, like places in Western Australia, the Kimberley in particular, that's maybe not accessible so much so by airplane and aircraft, but you can get there through a cruise. And so it becomes very beneficial for a country like Australia, where you have so many fantastic places in Australia that's not it's typically accessible, but you can get there by sailing. And so that's the value of cruising to the Australian economy, bringing in jobs. So we know because of the rebranding, there's going to be a loss of jobs, especially at the Sydney office. It's going to be downgraded a bit because you don't have P&O branding there. But as it relates to the communities themselves, they're still going to get the ships. And I would even predict that Carnival may send more ships down to this side of the world, which is going to be beneficial to Australians.
And Janelle, this larger boat, I mean, they are enormous-sized vessels when you stand up beside them, and we're only 30 metres from the water's edge. But I understand some of these boats now hold over 5,000 passengers.
Absolutely. Royal Caribbean actually just launched the largest cruise ship in the world, which is called Icon of the Seas. Mm. And that was launched late last year into early this year, so around December, January. And that ship is like a small village, a small community between crew and passenger that can hold almost 9,000 persons, you know, and there are many towns that are not even as big as 9,000 persons.
No, that's amazing. To get all this knowledge on cruising, you must have done an awful lot of cruising. How many cruises have you been on?
I lost count at 30.
And which was the best experience?
Oh, that's a very tough one. I love all ships. It's difficult to decide which one is my absolute favorite because they all have something different to offer. So, for instance, the Royal Caribbean brand is more family. The P&O brand has a more Aussie vibe, or it used to. But, now it's still in existence, but it used to have a more Australian vibe. You know, when you go there, you know what you're going to expect. Royal Caribbean had a mixture of American, Australian flair, and when Virgin Voyages came, it was one of the few adult-only cruise lines. So, of course, the audience is a bit more, the passenger profile is a bit more mature. And then you have Disney, which is all about the kids, and it takes you back to childhood, and it's nostalgia because you're seeing Mickey Mouse and you're seeing Daffy Duck, and it's fantastic, you know. So, Celebrity Cruise, again, if you want some luxury, you go to a Celebrity Cruise brand, and that gives you a totally different experience. It's really difficult for me to say which one's my absolute favorite. Each cruise has a different vibe, and as long as you're meeting amazing people from all over the world, which is what every cruise experience does, and you're going to various destinations and you only unpack once, so you don't have to worry about unpacking, then I just love any cruise, actually. I'm just giddy for cruises.
Is it good value for money?
Oh, absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite ways to travel because it allowed me to see multiple destinations in one trip. So, for instance, instead of having to go to multiple countries, for instance, in Asia or in the Pacific Islands or in the Caribbean, instead of having to go and pack and, you know, get your paperwork for each island, you know, you just take a cruise. This morning, you're in this destination, you go to sleep, you wake up, you're in another island and another island, and the experience continues. And as well as having that packaged holiday feel and offer is great. You pay one fee, you get accommodation, you get food and beverage, you get entertainment, and you also get the travel to multiple destinations. So it is the best value for money in tourism.
And Janelle, I've heard sometimes you read in the Seniors magazine or other press that people, retirees, it can be more affordable to sell up your family home and move onto a boat and stay on a boat permanently and just continually cruise. Is that a viable option in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. That's actually a trend that we're observing in cruise marketing, where a lot of especially older passengers, the boomers, are opting for sailing on a cruise ship as opposed to going to an aged care home. It's actually cheaper, it's great value for money, and it's a much better experience.
It's a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun than being in a, aged care home. Who wouldn't want to see the world? And at the same time, it saves on your retirement dollars. So it's a win-win all around.
So is there in fact a boat that would sail under that banner, the retirement boat?
Well, what you're finding now, especially in Europe, is quite trending, and it can happen on any ship. So what happens is the passenger will just book back-to-back cruises instead of actually coming off. Yes. So they'll just say, I want to sail for a year or 2 years.
Janelle, on that one, any of these boats actually offer the opportunity for people to buy a suite and basically it's yours, or they don't give you.
There was one called. We put a phone call in. It was years ago. We actually talked to them, sort of ship to shore. They were selling. The boat was called the World, as I remember.
Yes, that was an offer.
And 250,000 bought you a cabin.
Yes, it did. Yes, you do have boats, especially in the UK market. It's a bit more popular. It's taking a while to take off in Australia again because of the seasonality of our cruise market. Yeah. But especially in the UK, it's when you have a lot more boomers and an aging population as well, between UK and Europe, it's definitely something that you can do. You can purchase your own cabin and basically under a lease agreement, and you stay there and you kind of become a part of the crew because it's not like you're working on the ship, but you feel like you are because you never get off.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds very interesting. The only thing I'd say would be, as Les just pointed out, the size of these boats must be pretty impersonal. Are there any kind of slow boats to China, kind of old tramp steamers where, you might see Sydney Greenstreet or Humphrey Bogart or characters? I don't know.
Oh, the slow boat, I haven't heard that one in years.
Slow boat to China.
that back, because I haven't actually heard that in years.
Well, have you, a personal question, have you had a shipboard romance?
Let's leave that one alone.
In other words, yes. How many, Janelle? How many?
Well,
about 30.
Oh my! You just called me out right there. Okay. Let me correct that.
It's radio. We can't see the colour of your face.
What I will say is that the Love Boat show from the 70s have actually come back, and it's a dating show. And it's actually on, I think it's Pacific Encounter that does that one where they'll take Aussie singles and bring them to the UK. Yeah. And while they're sailing through the different territories, they'll stop and pick up people from different countries, and it becomes one big love story. And there are many, many Australians who've met the loves of their life through the Love Boat.
And did you, Janelle, you're a single lady or married?
I'm single and still
there you are. So you're still part of the Love Boat story.
Single and enjoying it.
Single and enjoying it. Yes.
And what do you do with your PhD? Is that something that you would apply to, I don't know, writing about the business, or would you work in the business, or would you become a travel agent? How are you going to use it?
Oh, well, right now there's a course that Griffith University offers, which is a cruise industry experience course, where it's a part of our bachelor's and master's in tourism, international tourism and hospitality management. And so I'm the lecturer for that course. And so that's what I've been doing in Australia. And of course, as an academic, you're required to publish papers and to research and to network with industry.
And to cruise.
Exactly. And to cruise. My job is so hard, right?
Janelle, Jeremy did mention the so-called slow boat to China. I do understand some people have the opportunity of booking passage on freight liners.
Yes.
And that goes to the Arctic Circle or where have you.
Absolutely.
And they're slow boats, and they're obviously not Rolls-Royce accommodation and beverage and food, but an interesting way of travelling.
Yes. Those are expedition cruises. So from our side, there's more ships going to Antarctica because it's closer to Australia. But if you do want to go to the Arctic, absolutely. Those are usually expedition cruises, which is not the same as a regular cruise ship. It's a little bit, as you mentioned, a bit more rugged, a little bit more, you're not going to get, as you mentioned, 5-star treatment. It's really for persons who are a little bit more down to earth. You're not looking for luxury. You're just looking to go to the places, maybe to hike an iceberg or to see some polar bears or to do research. A lot of people do go to do navigational research on different species that live in those areas, and so those are slower boats, I would say. Maybe not to China, but definitely to Antarctica.
And the trick, I think, is probably not to leave it too late. Years ago, they had a thing called the Women's Weekly World Discovery Tour. Now, you've probably never heard of it, but it was because Women's Weekly was it was the must-buy magazine for most families in Australia for years and years and years. Came out once a week. And it was just part of the culture.
And Women's Day, Women's Weekly, Women's Day.
Yeah, that's right. That was the opposition. But the Women's Weekly people decided to market themselves as these world discovery tours. And the sadness was that so many people left it too late and ended up not enjoying the thing, but coming back in a box. So don't leave it too late.
Yes, it's true. And one of the trends in cruising, cruises were initially focused on mostly older demographics.
Yeah.
A lot of boomers were going on cruises, but actually there's a trend in cruising for much younger travelers. So millennials, younger generations, Gen Z, like I just took a group of Gen Z students, they loved it and they're going to go back. They said, oh, Miss, I never thought a cruise ship could give me this many experiences and fun and excitement. So there's a big trend for that.
I think people would probably have a change of personality too. They would be different people on a cruise. I suppose more liberated, more adventurous, perhaps.
You're talking because of the beverage package, Jeremy.
Well, not the beverage package.
The beverage package.
Just the idea that you're not going to be on this boat forever. And the people you meet are like, ships passing in the night.
Maybe disposable.
Ships passing in the night.
Like we said the other day about investing in a spouse. If the investment pays off, you keep it. If it doesn't pay off, you just jettison it.
I don't think that's very moral, Les. That's not very moral, Les. No. Anyway, it's wonderful to talk to you. It's also fascinating to see that the industry that was on its knees after COVID has bounced back so strongly.
Absolutely. High demand all around. And so the signal from what P&O announced this week is not to indicate or to signal that there's anything wrong with our cruise market. In fact, it's more of a strategic move from an economical and cost operating sense, for Carnival to say, hey, it's much easier for us to scale our operations if we take on these additional ships. They're ours anyway. Let's just fully do the rebranding, give it a new, fresh renovation uplift. And so I think it's a good thing.
Wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
It's wonderful. Good luck with your PhD. I'm sure you'll get it, Doctor.
Thank you.
So you're in my book as Doctor.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Janelle.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Janelle Smith from, she's probably going to be a professor of tourism from Griffith University.
And she's looking for love, no doubt.
Well, I think if you're going to have an adventure on a boat, it would be a very good thing.
It's part of the mix.
Part of the mix, yeah. And some of them you see advertising, no kids and no casinos. Now, I don't know if kids and casinos would particularly annoy or attract people. But it's, I guess, an angle.
Look, I think the really good thing, Jeremy, is that she said that it's almost like business as usual. There's no change in the frequency of boats, cruising around the Australian coastline, which is great.
Yep.
And I don't think P&O's messaging was all that fantastic, to be honest, because it did almost sound like doom and gloom when they made the announcement yesterday.
Yeah, well, I suppose to some of them it was sort of the end of an era, and people don't like change, and I can understand that. Have you ever heard of CTC lines?
Oh, a long time ago.
Long time ago. Yeah. CTC were in the building in Sussex Street, 2GB's building, because 2GB built that whole, 12-storey building, and we had the top floor and 3 others, I think. And the rest of the building was filled with all sorts of businesses and whatnot. And in fact, the Russian consul general had his office in there, and the CTC line, which was a Russian cruise line. And there was an occasion, I don't know exactly what happened, but they were opening the office, the CTC line's office, and the guy came to 2GB, the reception desk, and in this very, you're just looking at him, you swear this guy was KGB. this guy has nothing to do with cruising. This guy is
spy, another spy.
You have people who open things. I'm looking for a celebrity. I'm looking for somebody to come and cut the wire, the ribbon, or whatever. Anyway, I was just told to go downstairs and cut the ribbon to open the office, which I duly did. It was hardly out of my way, and that was an interesting experience. Then he came along after, the same guy, and he said, "You will come on cruise. You will come on cruise as thank you." Oh. And I said, "Yes, sir."
Yes, sir.
What is that bulge under your arm? Is that a large heart or a 38?
Yeah.
Anyway, we duly went on that cruise, and it was a Russian, because the CTC line, they named all their boats after Russian opera singers. And this one was called the Fedor Shaliapin.
Oh, I remember it well, yes.
The Fedor Shaliapin.
Yes.
And it was an interesting cruise, I guess, by cruising. Well, I had no experience, so what would I know? But the food was terrible. Stodgy. Barely. Yeah. No, cabbage. Lots of cabbage. I remember lots of cabbage. And I suppose the Russians liked it, but I don't know how it fitted in with Australian taste.
We actually did a river cruise between Moscow and St. Petersburg along the river system and into the lake system. Extremely pleasant, and anyone who thought that the Soviets had done a bad job with infrastructure got it sadly wrong, because what they did to establish Moscow and St. Petersburg with the underground road system buildings, they did a fabulous job at the peril of the public, of course, who was starving and didn't have such a very good life. But the infrastructure was certainly, to this day, made very well and very effective. But on the subject of cuisine, the Russians like a hearty breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
So things like stroganoff and potato instead of cereal is the name of the game for Russian breakfast. They like their early morning tucker. Okay. I think they like to get the ballast in early so that the boiler can function properly all day.
Well, you never know. It might be your last meal.
Could be.
Just if it's there, have it. Another thing that sticks out in my mind is that most nights, if you were out on the deck, most nights you'd have the interesting experience of witnessing the Fedor Shaliapin rendezvousing with a submarine. That's perfectly true. It
like Harold Holt rendezvoused with the submarine.
This was a huge, and I don't imagine it was the same submarine every night. I think there were a lot of them. Maybe it was just an excuse to sort of be out there and being able to supply submarines without it causing too much fuss. But these were really big atomic black, enormous things, black atomic submarines. Memories. Yeah. Anyway, I think cruising sounds interesting, doesn't it?
She
just spent a couple of years.
Janelle opened up many opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's true.